Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Darian and today we're going to be talking about all the books that I read in January. So yes, that means wrap-ups are back in 2024. I did not do any reading wrap-ups in 2023, and honestly, as much as these are probably my least favorite videos to film, I did miss having those to look back on, especially at the end of the year, because my memory is not always great and I struggle to remember what I read in the year, and so I always like having these monthly wrap-ups to look back on for myself to see what I read during the year, when I read it, and also what I thought about it, because by the time we get to the end of the year I often just forget what books are about no matter how much I love them. So we're bringing wrap-ups back in 2024. I hope you guys are excited to actually hear about the books that I'm reading this year, because last year I never really spoke about it unless I was filming a vlog or something. So I am happy to be bringing these back this year. Also, let's not talk about that I still have my Christmas decorations up. I've just been too lazy to take them down. Like, I'm in school, okay? I have better things to do, so you'll have to forgive me. Hopefully by the next video maybe they'll be down, I don't know, but I won't promise anything. So we're gonna start with some stats. I thought that would be interesting to incorporate into my monthly wrap-ups now. So in January I managed to read 10 books, which is really great for me. I think it's a great way to start the year, especially since I'm planning on reading 100 books this year. So as of right now I am one book ahead of my Goodreads goal. Will it stay like that? Probably not, but right now I feel good about it, okay? So I read 10 books and 3,028 pages throughout all those books. In terms of the genres I read one anthology, one contemporary, one fantasy, one literary fiction, 2 memoirs, 1 mystery, 1 nonfiction, and 1 romance. So a pretty good mix. The only genre I repeated was memoirs, and that is for a video that hopefully will be coming soon. But we'll see. In terms of the format, I read 8 novels, 1 novella, and 1 short story collection. And in terms of author status, I read 3 debuts, 4 authors that are new to me, and 3 authors that I've read from before. I read 5 audiobooks and 5 physical books this month. And in terms of my ratings, I gave 1 2-star, 1 3-star, 4 4-stars, 1 4.5 star, and then 3 books that I didn't rate, which were all the nonfiction books. In terms of the age group, I read 7 adult books and 3 YA books. And in terms of the year they were published, I read 6 books from 2023, 2 books from 2020, 1 book from 2022, and 1 book from 2015. So those are my stats for the month. Hopefully that was interesting, but without further ado, let's just get into the books that I read. So I'm going to organize this by talking about the lowest rated books to the highest rated books, but I'll start by talking about the 3 books that I didn't rate, because all of these are nonfiction and I don't rate nonfiction books unless they're like new favorite books for me. Then I want to give it 5 stars. Otherwise I just don't rate them, because it just feels weird to rate a nonfiction book, especially because 2 of these were memoirs. It just felt weird to rate them. Also, a few of the books that I read in January were for videos, so I won't go too into detail about what I thought about these books, so you can stay tuned for the video that I read them in to find out more of my thoughts. Okay, I'm gonna stop rambling. So the first book that I did not rate was The Woman in Me by Britney Spears. This is Britney Spears' memoir. I read this like kind of late, considering it came out in, I think, September or October. I feel like everyone has already read this, but it was actually the first book that I finished this year, and it feels weird to say I enjoyed it, but it was definitely a very easy book to get into. Like, I wouldn't say she has the most amazing writing style or anything, but I did listen to this, and it's Michelle Williams who narrates this audiobook. She did a great job. She put everything she had into this narration, and I never really knew that much about Britney Spears. Like, I knew her most popular songs, and then in the past few years I learned more about her conservatorship. So this book was pretty eye-opening for me, because like growing up I didn't listen to her music a lot, so I really did not know too much about her, and the things that she went through, like, this book really touched me a lot. I just felt so bad for her and how she was basically villainized in the media over and over again, and how, you know, her image was kind of reduced to her mental health breakdown, and no one really cared about trying to take care of her. They just cared about like the outbursts or whatever that she was having, and I just felt so bad for her. So I'm really happy that I read this book because I got to know more about her, and I'm so happy for her that she is free from her conservatorship now, and I just hope she just does whatever she wants for the rest of her life because I just want her to be happy. I find like I finished the book and I started listening to more of her music because I just wanted to like get to know her more. I don't know, she's very strong for going through what she went through and coming out on the other side, and I just have a lot of respect for her. And also I hate her family and also Justin Timberlake, so that's great. But I did read this for a video, so I'll have more thoughts coming in that video, but I really enjoyed this memoir. I thought it was very interesting to read, and if you are at all interested, even if you don't know Britney Spears very well like I didn't, I would still highly recommend because I think it will help change the idea that you probably have of her in your head, and I think she's definitely a person worth knowing. The next book that I read that I did not rate was A Living Remedy by Nicole Chung, I believe is the author's name. This is another memoir, and you're following this woman, well, it's her memoir, but the author, Nicole, she goes through her life talking about how she was adopted. She is a Chinese American woman who was adopted by two white parents, and how that felt for her growing up in such a white area, and how she kind of felt like an outcast, you know, with her family. She didn't really feel like she felt in because she was the only Asian person around. So that was definitely a very interesting perspective to read from. And it also talked a lot about the death of her two parents. They died pretty close together, and they died fairly young. She had a lot of mixed feelings towards her parents because of the way that she grew up, because of the way that they never really understood what it was like to raise a child that is from a minority race. But I thought her exploration of grief was just obviously really well done. It's her own personal journey, so a lot of it really resonated with me, but I felt like this was a book that was written for people specifically going through losing their parents. Like I've experienced a lot of grief, but I thankfully have not lost a parent yet, and a lot of what she was saying was just stuff that I could not relate to, which it does not need to. I don't need to relate to it, but I feel like people who are going through that grief or have gone through that grief can get a lot out of this book, because that was really the focus of this book, was the specific loss of losing a parent. So I'm very happy I read this, and I definitely appreciated this book for what it was. I wouldn't say the writing style was anything like amazing or anything, but I definitely appreciated learning more about this woman's life and what she's gone through. And then the final nonfiction book that I read 3 whole nonfictions in 1 month. This probably will never happen again. But the last book I read that I did not rate was The 100 Years War on Palestine by Rashid Khalidi, I think is how you say his name. I'm so sorry if I said that wrong. But this is basically a nonfiction book from the years 1917 to 2017, I believe, of just the history of Palestine and, you know, the oppression that they've experienced. And this is obviously a very relevant book to read right now. I have definitely seen this book going around a lot, and I think that if you are at all interested at learning more, even if you're not, actually, I think everyone should pick this book up. It is very digestible to read. I find that even if you don't know a lot about history or if you don't know a lot about politics, this is a very accessible read to understand what the Palestinians have gone through and what they are currently going through. And if anything, it just gives you more empathy for them, and I think that's what they deserve. And having this knowledge, I think, is extremely important, because the world has constantly turned their back on them over and over again over the last 75 years, over the last 100 years. And I think it's really important for us as people who do not live in this area to really understand what these people have gone through and to have some empathy for them. If you don't already have empathy towards them, I think it is extremely important to educate yourself on what Palestine has been through and what they are currently going through. I don't know what else to say aside from I think everyone should pick up this book. It is extremely well informed. The author also includes some personal stories, and just it's a lot, but I think it's really important for us as, especially like those of us living in North America who are so far removed, I think it's just really important for us to read about and to understand how we got to where we are now and why what's happening now is happening. I just really think that this is a book that everyone should pick up and read. I don't know what else to say about it except please pick this book up. So now we're getting into the books that I did rate. So we are starting with the lowest rated one. I am so sad to be talking about this. I rated this book 2 stars, and that is A Winter in New York by Josie Silver. I don't want to talk about it. I really don't want to talk about it. This is the same author who wrote One Day in December, which is, we all know, one of my favorite books ever. So when I saw that she was writing another like wintry book, I was so excited, and I thought this book was not good. Like, I know One Day in December isn't like the peak of literature or anything. I don't think it's like anything crazy well written or anything, but I just have so much fun with that book, and it has a special place in my heart. This book was absolutely ridiculous. I don't even know how to explain what this book is about, but you're following Iris is her name, which is funny because another book has Iris. But anyways, you're following Iris, and her mother passed away from cancer, I think 3 years ago. They lived in the UK, but Iris has recently moved back to New York because her mom spent a lot of time in New York, and she used to be part of this band. And Iris has this picture of her mom and this mysterious man at this like gelato shop in New York. And Iris has never known who this man is. The only thing Iris knows is that her mother got this family's like secret gelato recipe. Only people in the family know this secret gelato recipe, but like this man messed up and told her mom because like he was in love with her, obviously. And so Iris ends up stumbling upon this gelato shop in New York, and it turns out that the man who was in the picture is now a grandfather, and he has recently suffered a stroke and cannot remember the gelato recipe, and he is the only living person who knows this recipe except for Iris. So she meets the grandson, which his name is, what is his name? Gio? Yeah, she meets Gio, the grandson, and Gio is like freaking out because how are they gonna make their gelato if they don't have the gelato recipe? And so Iris is like, oh, well, I'm a cook, so I'm gonna help you figure it out. Note that I said cook and not like ice cream maker. So obviously she's like very good at making ice cream, obviously, because she's a cook. So she's like, oh, I'm gonna help you try to like recreate the recipe because I'm a cook and I'm you know, I understand tastes and whatever. So she goes over like every day to help this guy try to figure out the recipe for their gelato, but like secretly she knows what it is, but she doesn't want to tell them that she knows what it is because she thinks it'll break their heart that their grandfather once told the recipe to someone who wasn't part of their family. But then of course she ends up falling for this grandson, but she can't tell him that she knows the recipe. And then there's this there's this whole other side story that the reason Iris recently moved to New York is because she was running away from her ex-boyfriend who was abusive to her. I don't think he was physically abusive, but he was definitely abusive in the sense that he undermined her, he yelled at her, he gaslighted her all the time, just not a very nice guy in general. So she recently ran to New York, and then she is often worried that he is gonna find her and come after her again. So this book just, I don't think it really knew what it wanted to be. So like part of it, or like most of the book was like this silly goofy romance between Iris and Gio, and they're trying to figure out the gelato recipe, ha ha ha. And then all of a sudden the tone would shift so much because she would like think she saw her ex and she'd be like so scared, and then all of a sudden it felt like a thriller book, and it felt so out of place in a book like this. And I just don't think that, I think Josie Silver should have chosen which one she wanted to do, and if she spent more time on what genre she wanted to be in, it could have been good. If this was a thriller book, it could have been a good thriller book. If this was just a romance, it could have been a good romance. But it was a romance with like a dash of thriller. And I just don't think it really worked. The writing was also so bad. There were so many lines that I read in this book and I was like, what are you saying? Like, people, nobody talks like this. Oh my god, it was It was so disappointing. So I'm very upset about it because I love One Day in December so much, but this definitely makes me nervous to read her other books because like maybe One Day in December was just like a one-hit wonder for me and I'm not gonna like her other books. I don't know, but I don't really recommend this. I gave it 2 stars. I just thought it was super silly and just not very well written. So next we have Family Meal by Brian Washington, which I gave a 3 star. I also read this for a video, but I don't remember the characters' names. This is about our main character who recently lost his partner who died in a police shooting. So he is dealing with the death of his partner and he is just he's not doing well. He is dealing with his pain by taking a lot of drugs, having a lot of sex with strangers, and eating a lot. And so there's a lot of heavy topics in this book, obviously grief and police brutality, as well as drug use and disordered eating. And so this was quite a heavy book to read, but the reason I gave it a 3, I really appreciated what this book tried to do, but I just couldn't get behind the writing style of this book. It was very stream of consciousness writing, which I don't always dislike, but the way this book did it, I just was not really connecting with any of the characters. One thing that I really didn't like about the writing style of this book was that it was told in 3 different perspectives, but instead of like going back and forth between these perspectives, it was like the first third of the book was told in one person's perspective. Then the middle third was another person's perspective, and then the final third was a third person's perspective. And I didn't really like that because we are in like the main character's head who recently lost his partner for the first third of the book, and so I'm used to being in his head, and then suddenly you're in someone else's head who like interacts with this main character all the time, and so suddenly you're seeing him from someone else's perspective, which like I definitely understand for other people that would probably be really interesting, but for me it just really threw me off because I really had to like adjust my brain kind of to get used to suddenly not being in this person's head anymore but seeing him from someone else's perspective. I don't know, like something about it just really threw me off, but I do like really appreciate the themes that this book discussed. It just unfortunately was not for me, but I do want to try some of Brian Washington's other books because I have heard good things about, I think it's called Memorial. And I've heard really good things about that one. So I think it was just the writing style of this book just didn't really work for me. So now we have our 4 4-star reads. So at the bottom of the 4-star reads, I would probably put This Winter by Alice Oseman. This is obviously a little novella set in the Heartstopper universe. This takes place, I think, between, wait, is it? I think this takes place between volume 4 and 5 of Heartstopper, but it might be after volume 5. I'm not really sure, but this is definitely before the Nick and Charlie novella and definitely past where the show has gone so far. It basically takes place during the first Christmas since Charlie has been diagnosed with an eating disorder, and so he is extremely stressed about it because his family's coming over and he's not really sure how his eating disorder is going to manifest when there's so many other stressors going on. And so it's following mostly him but also Nick, just trying to be there for him. And I think the first part was also told in Tori's perspective and how like she just really just wants to be there for Charlie, but also wants to give him space. So it's just about these characters trying to figure out how to help each other, what the best way is to go about this. And obviously, I mean, I love these characters so much. I already know these characters very well, so it was definitely nice to be with them again, even though they're going through a hard time and I just want to help them in any way I can. But I wouldn't, like, these novellas, like, I feel like I can't give it more than a 4-star just because, I mean, first of all, like, the font is ginormous. Like this, I read this in, I don't know, half an hour. We do get introduced to Henry in this book, which is Nick's new dog, so that is great, but I don't know. It's not like I'm not gonna think about this book. Even though I love the characters, it's not, you know, as good as the graphic novels or anything, but because I love them, I still give it a 4-star. if that makes any sense. So if you haven't read this, I mean, it's more Heartstopper content, so I would definitely recommend. And then I guess next of the 4-star reads was Against the Loveless World by Susan Abulhawa, and this is a book about a Palestinian girl, and it is being told from the future where we know she is incarcerated in Israel and we don't know how she got there, and so it's basically about her like reflecting on her life and how she got to where she is now. I think she grew up living in Kuwait, but her parents escaped Palestine during the Nakba. So you're just following her growing up and, you know, learning about the Israeli occupation. This was, I mean, obviously quite a heavy read. I think if you are sensitive to topics of war, maybe just be careful going into this book because it really does not hold back. There are a lot of upsetting things happening in this book, but if you can handle it, Again, I think this is a very important book to be reading. I think reading from Palestinian voices is just the bare minimum of what we can do right now. I thought this was extremely well written. I think my mistake was listening to the audiobook rather than reading it physically, because I found listening to the audiobook I got lost quite often because we would be going back and forth in time often, and I would just get confused about where we were and who these characters were, and so I did feel pretty lost quite a few times, but the writing was beautiful. I would say that if you have access to the physical book, I would probably recommend reading that over the audiobook because I just didn't think the audiobook was extremely well done, and I feel really bad saying that because it is the author who narrates it herself, and I don't think she was super successful at doing voices for other characters, because I found that all her voices for female characters sounded like a small child, and the voices for male characters just like did not sound like, I don't think voice acting is where her talent shines. I think her writing is where her talent shines. I feel so bad talking about this, but I really want people to read this and to be able to appreciate the story. And so if you're able to, I would definitely recommend reading it physically over listening to the audiobook. And like if the audiobook is your only option, I still would recommend reading it, but I found it hard to understand which character was speaking because all the female characters sounded the same and all the male characters sounded the same. I feel so bad though, but she is an excellent writer and I definitely want to read anything she writes. And again, I think this is a very important story to be reading right now, but if you can, I would definitely recommend reading it physically over listening to the audiobook. And then the next 4-star read I have is Out There by Kate Folk. This is a short story collection and I read it for the Buzzwordathon this month because the buzzword were the 3 theirs. And this is, how do you explain the theme of this short story collection? I don't read a lot of short story collections and I am like notorious for not really liking them, but this is definitely my favorite short story collection that I've read so far. All of these stories kind of had like a touch of like science fiction added to them, and for the most part I really enjoyed most of the stories. I think there were a couple that I thought were kind of pointless, but my problem with short stories is that I always want more of them. Like the ones I like, I'm never satisfied with how short they are, which I mean is the whole point of a short story collection, is that they're short stories. But I really liked a lot of these stories, except now that I'm thinking about it, I'm trying to remember. I mean, one of the stories I really liked was the one where instead of liking people's like physical traits, they're attracted to like their insides, like their organs. I thought that one was interesting. There was another one that I think I really liked, but now I don't remember them. And I don't have the book anymore because I got it from the library. But trust me, there were a few stories that I really, really liked. And so I definitely, if Kate Folk ever releases another short story collection, I think I would be interested to read this. So I had a lot of fun with this one. My memory is just horrible, but yeah, 4 stars overall. Some stories I really loved, some I didn't like as much. But so far it's my favorite short story collection I've read, so that's good. And then the last 4-star book I read, which is my favorite of the 4 stars, is Suddenly a Murder by Lauren Munoz, and this was so much fun. I really, really enjoyed this book. This is following a group of teenagers who just graduated high school, and our main character named Izzy. Is her name Izzy? I think so. She's part of this friend group where pretty much everyone in this group is extremely wealthy, but she is definitely not, and her family has a lot of financial struggles. She also has a sister who's disabled, and so she has a lot of medical expenses that she helps pay for. So her friend ends up organizing this like graduation party at this like remote island, and they're all gonna dress up in like 1920s wear and have a 1920s themed party, and then one of them ends up dead, and he was clearly murdered, and so it was one of these 6 or 7 kids that did it, and so detectives come to the island, and you know, it's a murder mystery. I don't know, there was just something about this that I thought was really interesting. I really loved how it was written, and also like the story goes back and forth between the present day where the investigation is going on, and then it will go back to something that happened in the past, and it'll show different interactions each character had with the character who was murdered, and so it kind of gives all of them a motive, so you're just trying to figure out, I mean, maybe this is just like every single murder mystery book, but I don't read a lot of them, so I was easily impressed. I really liked it, especially for a YA. I find YA mysteries are very hit or miss, but I really had a lot of fun with this, and honestly, the whole book, I thought I had it figured out, like, not who the murderer was, but like something else that happened, I guess, and I was completely wrong about it, and I was so sure, and I was like, oh well, obviously they're hinting at this, and I think it was either me not reading a lot of mysteries, so I'm just dumb, or it was just very well written, but I choose to believe it was very well written, and I just had a lot of fun with it, and so I definitely recommend this book. I haven't seen anyone else read it, but it is definitely one that I think you should check out because I just thought it was so much fun. The audiobook also was great, so highly recommend this one. And finally, the highest rated book that I read last month sadly wasn't a 5-star, but it was still 4.5 stars, but that was Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross. This is the sequel and the conclusion to the Divine Rivals series, or the Letters of Enchantment series, I think is the name of the series, but this is obviously the sequel to Divine Rivals because the covers look the same. But what do I say about this? That's not a spoiler. I mean, this book follows basically right where Divine Rivals left off, and if you don't know, Divine Rivals follows Iris and Roman, and they are 2 news reporters who are trying to get the scoop about this war that is going on between these 2 gods, and they end up going to the front lines to write about this war, and they are rivals, obviously. What they don't realize, or what Iris doesn't realize, is that both of the typewriters that they have are like magically connected, so they can send each other letters no matter where they are through their typewriters, and so they start corresponding with each other, and Roman knows from the beginning that he is talking to Iris, but Iris doesn't realize that she is talking to Roman, and so they kind of start to fall for each other through these letters, but in real life, Iris finds Roman very annoying, very frustrating. So it's very sweet. I love Iris and Roman so much, and I mean, Divine Rivals was my favorite book of 2023, so I was very excited about this. I didn't like this one quite as much as the first book. It was mostly just because there's this one part in this book, or I guess not like one specific scene, but one storyline, I guess, that basically mirrors the first book, and it is like basically exactly something that happens in the first book, but the roles are reversed. I thought that was just a little too repetitive. Like, I was like, okay, we already saw this, we already went through this, let's kind of get away from this now. So that just bothered me a little bit, but aside from that, I mean, I love the characters. I love the new character. What was his name? Clearly I loved him so much. I want to say, oh, Tobias. I loved Tobias and like the little romance that he had with another character, and the ending made me cry. I thought it was beautiful and so sad, and Rebecca Ross's writing is beautiful, and I definitely want to read River Enchanted this year because I just fell in love with her writing, and I thought this was an amazing end to this duology. Sadly, it wasn't as good for me as Divine Rivals, but I still loved it. I mean, it's still 4.5 stars, and this story and these characters will stay with me for a long time probably. So those are the 10 books that I read in January. Clearly it is getting darker. This took a lot longer than I had hoped, but let me know if you have read any of these books or what your favorite book that you read in January was. What was your first book of the year? I want to know all that. If you watched till the end, leave the ice cream emoji for the gelato. The like controversial gelato in a winter New York. So yeah, leave that emoji if you watch till the end. And let me know also if you're happy that the wrap-ups are back or if you don't really care. I just want anything. Let me know anything, okay? Okay. But thank you guys so much for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys soon with another video soon. Bye!